Welcome. Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining me again this week for yet another story from the collection of short stories from the book entitled Thanks for the Yellow Roses. I hope your week has been wonderful, warm, friendly, loving, and I hope that you've been well. That's for sure. The title of this next episode, episode 3, is called We Have Met the Enemy. And it's a story about some time that I had visiting Cuba many years ago. It's a balmy late afternoon in Cardenas, Cuba. The late afternoon light paints all forms of life with its warm golden palette. I have a few hours until dinner hour while my friends from the Plowshares Institute relax after conducting an intensive 2-day seminar on conflict transformation. The refurbishing breeze from the Caribbean gently caresses the organic nature that fills my camera's viewfinder with layer upon layer of street life, which reminds me to tell you that there are many photographs in this collection of short stories that I think you would enjoy. Scores of bicycles are adorned by young and old alike. Horse-drawn taxis carrying their cargoes of people alongside construction materials. And occasional trucks spews telltale blue smoke from the combustion of diesel fuel. A seemingly endless array of colorful Chevys, Fords, and Dodges from a bygone era punctuate the scene, motored largely by Russian engines that replaced the originals during the heyday of the USSR-Cuban collaboration. Uniformed students awaiting rides via carriages, bicycles, buses, whatever, gaily engage one another in activity only teenagers can stir. Figures of the less well-to-do weave their way toward the tiny shadow-filled window. A few freshly baked rolls transported on the end of a feminine chestnut-colored hand engage for a handful of ration stamps. Spirited conversations fill the air from every direction as gaggles of youngsters harbor around the payphones like sentinels guarding against intrusion from the likes of the adult male patiently awaiting his turn, arms neatly folded across his belly, a knowing smile adorning his face. The entire scene captivates my imagination, etching indelible images in the lining of my heart, while playing out the alchemy of the black and white film that rolls its way toward completion. I am becoming drunk on the inspirational imagery of relationship. I am suddenly taken by the insertion of a well-maintained 1957 Chevy sedan, which has found its way to my side. It brings a smile to my heart as I recall a replica of its salmon and silver body in my former mother-in-law's driveway years ago. Privately, I wondered if it brings its owner as much pleasure as that one provided for her back then. My dream of times past is pleasantly interrupted by a flow of horse-drawn buggies approaching from all sides. Their converging motion is compelling, and I bring the viewfinder up to my eye to frame the timing in just the right configuration, with a blend of bicycles weaving in and out of the image and children forging their way amidst it all. It is frantic, yet symbolic of a world-class ballet, beautifully choreographed in its display of each disparate yet collaborative element, each contributing perfectly to a more complete whole. Stories within a story are everywhere writing themselves. While creating a few images of this variety, I notice at the left edge of my viewfinder a uniformed Cuban policeman approaching in my general direction, and I include him in an image or two, adding stark contrast to the softer canvas of life. I immediately forget his presence and continue to forge into this forest of living activity. A moment or two later, I really have no idea how much time had transpired. The policeman approaches me and asks if I speak Spanish. For just an instant, I think I'm a goner, but then realize I haven't done anything wrong, so simply relax into the moment awaiting what is sure to offer me. I remember saying to myself, this is only life, thus room for nothing else, especially fear. It's an instant of peace that comes with fills me beyond description, and His grace carries me through the entire upcoming incident. I tell the officer that I don't speak Spanish and ask if he can speak English. His response echoed mine. I motion him across the street to my living quarters, indicating as best I can that we might find a translator there. As we start across the main street, a huge bus almost takes us with it. I pull him back by the arm, obviously the right thing to do in a humanitarian sense. Even it did instantaneously dawn on me that he could just have easily taken my action as an aggressive one and shot me dead on the spot. Fortunately for both of us, I quickly point out the fast approaching vehicle, and he seems to understand the positive nature of my act. As we cross the street, another gentleman in plain clothes, an Afro-Cuban about 6 feet 4 inches tall, and a certain muscular 250 pounds, joins us. I motion to the building we are approaching, hoping he got the idea that we're headed for some help with translation. As soon as we clear the archway into the building, I ask the hostess if she is bilingual. She responds in negative, which gives plainclothes the impetus to ask, in perfect English, I might add, where I am from. When I answer the United States, he asks me for my passport. I say that I'll have to go to my room to get it, reflecting in my best spoken Spanish, un momento, por favor. Motioning upstairs with a wave closing with hasta pronto, just for the fun of it. On the way upstairs, I decide to leave my camera in the room, and do so, gathering my passport and visa as requested. When I return, my escorts begin recording information from the documents. Just then, a woman strides through the foyer, and the hostess asks if she speaks English. She says that she does, and proceeds to speak with a policeman. Turning to me, she asks in broken English, but in much better terms than my fractured Spanish, what I've been doing and where I'm staying. I tell her I'm staying at this domicile, and I've been involved in a 2-day workshop in conflict transformation, chuckling inwardly at the irony, and I was simply taking a few moments before dinner hour to photograph people on the streets, just as I had done yesterday. I am puzzled by your explanation and respond that people are my specialty, not houses, and that she relays my message to the policeman and turns to me saying, well, they say you've been photographing for 2 days and that you've taken pictures of the alien's house. The only house I can recall photographing was one with a green 1947 Ford in front of it, but there were no people in the vicinity of the car at the time. She conveys that to the gentleman, and returns to me with an now familiar, they say you've been taking pictures of the alien's house, and you're not supposed to do that. Or at least that's what I thought she said. Again, I rejoin, asking her what she means by the alien's house. I don't know what you mean by alien's house. No, she responds in a new understanding of the situation. Not an alien's house, alien's house. Alien who? I asked, absolutely confounded with the conversation. Alien Gonzalez, she says. You know, the little boy who lost his mother on the way from Cuba to the United States. Like the key piece of a picture puzzle falling neatly into place to save the day, all the fragments suddenly fit together. Alien Gonzalez lives here in Cardenas, I asked, bewildered by the enormity of realization. Yes, she says, just up the street, and they don't want you to take pictures of him. I thought he lived in Havana, I said, and didn't have any idea he was here or where he might live. I wouldn't want to invade his space in any event. Translator conveys my explanation to the police, and they remain non-committal in both words and deportment, still hunching over my passport and visa, continuing to record information. At that moment, a middle-aged Cuban woman who had been taking all this in speaks up in Spanish. From her demeanor, I can't tell which side she's on, and I just wait patiently for the translator to tell me what's going on. When the speaker finishes, translator turns to me and says that the speaker was vouching for me, indicating that she had seen me photograph on both days, and I was only photographing people in their normal travels of the day. I thank her for her input, hoping that it helped the situation. After a brief drop in the conversation, plainclothesman turns toward me and hands me back my papers, saying in perfect English, there's no problem. He says something else to translator in Spanish and turns to leave. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias, y mucho gusto, I say to the plainclothesman in the best way I know how, and shake his hand. He turns to leave without comment. I repeat the same to the uniformed officer, and the empty response repeats itself. Those that remain take a communal deep breath, followed by some chatting among the three women. Translator turns to me, saying that the plainclothesman is Alien's private 24-hour-a-day bodyguard, and he said that it would be okay for me to photograph in the direction facing away from Alien's house. I allow that I'm finished for the day, and as daylight was drawing to a close, and thanked everybody for their helpful assistance. Translator closed by saying that just 2 weeks ago a European was videographing Alien's house and was intercepted by the police, and not only solidly reprimanded, but they confiscated his video equipment as well. If I hadn't already felt fortunate, that made me feel all the more so. I reflect on this incident throughout the evening and have frequently since, and shared it with my friends and our host over dinner. They chide me for having been a maldito, a little mischief maker, the whole trip, and that it would have been simple justice if I had been taken to jail for the evening. I play along with them, but can't help but think about the horrendous conditions Alien must have to live under, with no real freedom from the potential for invasion into his privacy, and that we in the United States, Cuban Americans and all, who made such a political game of Alien's distressful situation, are the real aliens in the domain of humanitarianism. In a large way, I can't help but reflect upon all the conflicting information we've been fed by Cuban and American sources alike, and wonder what the truth of the matter really is. From my photographic episodes over 12 days, I've come to see people and circumstances that both confirm and deny that information, mostly confirm the information conveyed by everyday Cubans, and denying that distributed by our agencies at home and their agencies in Cuba. Studies by independent, nonpartisan agencies and foundations in the United States indicate that the embargo policy our government imposed more than half a century ago is a failed one. Generally, the Cuban people see the embargo as morally wrong, yet clearly acknowledge the difference between the policies of our government and concern of its people. The consensus seems to indicate that if the United States really wants to oust Fidel at that time, the most advantageous way would be to change our policy to one of purposeful engagement. Programs similar to those that have worked with other nations suggested reestablishing commercial relations, beginning with food and medicine and proceeding to two-way trade, actively encouraging academic, scientific, and cultural exchanges, and permitting travel by any U.S. citizen, exploring the collaborative programs dealing with anti-terrorism, migration, drug interdiction, and common environmental concerns, and increasing the level of diplomatic contacts and encouraging Cuba to relax restrictions on freedom of association and expression. If we were to drop the embargo and begin investing in the Cuban people in more humanitarian ways, they would perhaps be more willing to modify the Cuban government in order to have a higher quality of life and live more fully productive ones. As long as Cubans see our government as a primary enemy, however, they will not rise up against Castro or their government at any level. Simply put, when we change the way we see such things, the things we see will change. President George W. Bush recently exacerbated the economic situation by tightening the 44-year embargo, and stated intent being to further reduce the amount of hard currency available to Cubans, thus supposedly putting more heat on Castro. To all but the most naive, the primary intent employed by the current administration is to strengthen the Florida Cuban Americans' vote for the upcoming election. As long as we continue to see and act politically instead of spiritually, such policies are doomed to failure in the larger scope of life. The one thing that carries me through all the confliction is the disarming nature of the Cuban people. They surely are spiritual beings who know how to and do celebrate life for the gift it is. They are generally happy people despite their dire financial circumstances, and heartily demonstrate their strong character and generosity of spirit, and they seem reconciled with God. This oneness plays out in a sense of hope and an aura of inner peace and joy that are generally difficult to find in people of far greater means. As a famous poet, philosopher Pogo once said, "We have found the enemy, and he is us." Perhaps strengthening leadership will one day end this failed policy so the dreams and needs of the Cuban people can be fulfilled at last, despite their government and ours. It is time we stop belittling people with our oppressive political strength and instead uplift them with the power of our loving spirit. Nothing can do more to validate respect for the sacredness of human dignity. And so ends the story of We Have Met the Enemy. I had a wonderful trip there. The people were just vibrant and alive despite their lack. It was just a superb time. I'm so grateful for it. Well, okay, that pretty much ends our session for today. I'm just looking for a post that I want to read to you, because you know I like to close these sessions with a little nugget you can take with you, besides the story I just read to you. This one is from Brianna Wiest, at least it's attributed to her. If you're in a pivot period, if you're still bridging the space between where you are and where you want to be, remember that the person you're becoming is already within you. It's just convincing your mind to act consistently on what your heart already knows what it wants to do. Yes, it's about your heart knowing, not your noggin, not your ego for sure. Well, all right, folks, thank you for sharing this time with me. A little shorter story today, but I think empowering just the same. I look forward to seeing you next week. Meanwhile, I hope you stay well, that you're plenty happy. Namaste. I love you.